So we're joined tonight by special guest Martin Carew. Martin, what are you drinking this afternoon in Canada?
It's 3:20 here on a Friday afternoon. I haven't quite found the beer yet. I have lemon squash.
Very, very British. Well done.
I'm also joining the squash party, but I'm on pink squash, whatever that is today. I think it's summer fruits. But...
I'm going to shock you guys.
You want a Merlot?
No, Shiraz. It's a bottle called Koolybarra Reserve Shiraz. It is not Malbec. For the first time in about, I guess, probably 15, 20 weeks.
Is it from Aldi, though?
Of course it's from Aldi. Where else do you think I get my wine
your
from?
local wine dealership.
So I'm drinking a Square Nail Pale Ale. So there was no mention of a round hole.
I was going to say, I don't want to ask my usual question about what this says about the performance of your week, because we know that Kerry judges your week on the beer she buys you, Craig. So no further questions on that one. And Becca Kingdom, you've been at the beach this morning. If you don't fall asleep today, well done.
Thank you. I mean, it feels like a really, really long day right now. Like, I feel like I should have been asleep about 4 hours ago. So I have tea, because why break a habit of a lifetime?
And we do know that tired Becca is the grumpy Becca, which is the best Becca of the podcast. So I'm excited for this already. Cool. Should we kick off by starting with special guest Martin then? James, you said Martin is from WTRL. Martin, do you want to kick us off, explain a bit about who WTRL are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So WTRL, what are we? Not far away from 3 years of existence, I think, so far. I think we're best known, certainly nowadays, with the ZRL, or all the Americans I talk to, it's now the ZRL. I've forgotten how to say Z. And we also have our Thursday WTRL Team Time Trial as well, which is 119, I think, next week, as in number of weeks going. So essentially, we're an event organizer. We have a race team, a couple hundred people strong as well, and taking the world by storm. My job here is one of the co-owners. Anything to do with the website is coded and designed by me, all the data, the results, anything to do from that point of view. These days, I try and keep away a bit from the customer service side of it, the email stuff, but that's essentially me in a nutshell. This is many hours worth of work a week.
And we've said for a while here, I think if you talk to any of us in this chat, that we're huge fans of WTRL, but particularly the Team Time Trial events that you do. We get a lot of questions on Herd page about how do I get into racing? How do I do more racing on Zwift? And for us, we say it's a great sort of connect between, I've just done some group rides on Zwift, and actually now I want to do something that's a bit competitive, but I've still got that feel of group ride. A lot of the Herd teams will be no drop and things like that, although some Herd teams will be, we're going to go a bit faster than you're comfortable, so it'll stretch people. So yeah, we just think it's a fantastic event. But how did that come about? Well, we were, before we press record, you were talking about sort of looking at ways to break the game, really. But how did you guys sit down and think, right, we want to do a team time trial?
Well, and essentially we were looking at ways to add some interest to the game, and I think anybody who has the opportunity to put races on is always looking to try and do something a bit different, a bit imaginative, and bring something new. And the Team Time Trial, it's not a new concept. It's been around in cycling for a long, long time. And at the time, my, if you want to call him business partner, Steve, was fishing around trying to find people that might be interested in trying to put together a Team Time Trial. And strangely, at the time, there wasn't a great deal of interest. So he went at it alone. Found myself along the way. We had quite a lot of work to figure out how the game worked, how the time worked, how the data works, how we can make it fair, how we keep people out of interfering with teams that shouldn't be there, and all of those kind of things. So a little bit of testing. I want to say probably about based on the number of weeks we've been doing this, probably about 124 weeks or so ago, just over 2 years. We got something that worked, tested it, and away it went. And here we are, just finished week number 118.
Which is just crazy when you say it in weeks. Like it is every week. We all did the was it New Year's Eve or
Mhm.
I can't remember now, which was
the nasty
up,
ones.
up the Alp. So
New Year's Eve and
every week.
Christmas Eve. I think Becky, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Christmas Eve was Alp Zwift and New Year's Eve was Bologna, or was it the other way around?
Other way around.
Other way around.
I did New Year's Eve, and I remember going up the Alp. I remember actually having more fun in the herd racing down the Alp, and the heavier team laughing that they were much quicker on the descent as they rocketed past us.
By far my favourite TTTs. Those two are amazing.
I loved them. It was my first ever like sub 60 Alp, and Becca, I think you're policing the back, looking after anyone who might be dropping off. Chris Greenland, and it was great fun. And Craig, was it that Bologna where you had your crazy dropout and then decided to go absolutely batshit crazy to try and get back on again? It was, wasn't it?
It was. That was a lot of fun.
So while we're on routes then, Martin, what's your process with TTT? So obviously we've got James here who organises many weekly events as well. It'd be boring to ask him this question. So you've got a load of different routes. How long do you try and make the event? It always seems like it comes out about an hour. So does that limit the routes you can choose? And how do you pick and choose each week? And why did you decide to do mad routes at New Year's Eve that were really good fun?
Okay. So yeah, the routes, I mean, we vet the routes and we look at the routes from the perspective of what they would present as a challenge to a team. Obviously flat routes, keeping a team together, much easier. As soon as there's anything like the volcano or any kind of climb involved, it can be a bit more of a challenge keeping the team together. You lose the draft. At the end of the day, you climb as you climb. And if you're not well practiced at climbing, it's harder. It's as simple as that. I mean, in terms of how we pick the routes, I mean, essentially we have a list. I want to say it's 35 routes long. And while we used to select that week to week, obviously this far down the line and with everything scheduled out to the end of the year, the database essentially picks at random. I put a bit of script in. It organizes the routes. It tries to make sure that there's never New York, Watopia. It will always, at the moment, it's set so it's Watopia, then somewhere else, Watopia, then somewhere else. And it will pull them all together and try and keep some balance to not making sure all the hilly routes together and all the flat routes together. So there's plenty of variety.
And I want to talk about the other big thing you've been involved with, which was the Zwift Racing League as well, ZRL as we'll call it in this show, but I know we were talking about ZRL earlier. How did that come about? I think at one point that had 60,000 people actively racing in a week, which is just bonkers to think about. So yeah, how did that come about, and tell us a bit more about that?
So obviously with the rise of the WTRL TTT, if we can call it that, with numbers rocketing up, Zwift caught on to the TTT and what they were putting teams in. It got me talking to Steve Beckett, the marketing VP there, and numerous other people, and hassling various others, trying to find extra events to deal with the numbers that were coming in so that we weren't having people waiting 45 minutes just in the pen to get over the start line. And there was talk of really putting some focus on racing by Zwift. It actually came about from something that happened on Facebook. I don't know exactly what it was, but anyway, Steve picked up and said, right, we're going to do something. WTRL, because the sheer volume of people we can cope with, the speed of which we can deal with results, the ability to process data, to have relatively accurate results their first time, it kind of led to where we are today. And Zwift approached us. We had numerous meetings, numerous discussions, and Zwift Racing League was born. So we going to be going into the 4th season in a couple of months.
Now I'm going to ask you a slightly controversial question at this point. So let's talk about the Jungle TTT that happened a few months ago now. as an example of this. So I think that was really cool. It was you trying a bit of a different route. Typically, it tends to be kind of we're racing on road, for want of a better word, in the TTTs. But jungle, you threw two things at us that were interesting. One was it was a different bike choice. We're all on a mountain bike. But secondly, you put power ups in it, and I imagine like the herd is a wonderful corner of the internet. And if you ever kind of want to feel better about the internet and how it works, just come and sit on the herd pages for a while and watch everyone be nice to each other. But sadly, other internet forums I hear are not as nice. And with any new thing that gets tried, I did see some of the comments coming in and flying in. So I guess firstly is how much do you try and chop and change the formula? So I think you have got a winning formula in the TTT, but when you try new things, what's your process for thinking about how you try them? And secondly, like, how do you feel when you just get everyone kind of throwing their toys out of the pram a bit and kind of, you must want to kind of go, well, look, we've got to try stuff. We've got to change this up.
Yeah, I mean, Zwift's a funny old world, and you've got purists, pure cyclists on there who frown at power ups. That's ridiculing my sport, or whatever it happens to be. But the fact is, this is a game. You know, you're strapped on a bike, you're fixed in an upright position. Unless you're drunk sitting on it, it's not very easy to fall off it. Although I have seen plenty of people do that on various live streams. But yeah, at the end of the day, particularly with the TTT, when we're looking to try some new things, I mean, we've got people within the team, and we listen to the comments that come via social media, via email, different ideas, and we discuss and talk about them as to whether they would work. The jungle happens to be one of my favorite courses. Yes, since all the different values for the different surfaces came in to give you additional friction and things, it did take away from the jungle a little bit. But what we wanted to try was essentially a team time trial on mountain bikes, and there's no other course out there. There had to be the jungle. And then, of course, it was how many people are going to say, oh, that's ridiculous, mountain bikes too slow, so throw some power ups in to speed them up.
Actually, I think the 3 laps of the jungle TTT that we did, this is probably going back about a year ago, is actually one of my favorite ones. Was part of a brilliant team. We worked really well together, apart from the maybe 3 or 4 people that we dropped on the second lap.
We started with 8 and finished with like 3.5, but it was amazingly fun.
It goes down as like one of my most fun TTTs ever. And I think regardless of the fact it's on a mountain bike, because the terrain is the same the whole way through, as long as you choose the right bike, it's fine. But no, that was so much fun. And I'm not a fan of a jungle at all, but I absolutely love that TTT.
We've actually looked at a few of the kind of mixed courses. So you've got your predominantly tarmac, asphalt, whatever you want to call it, that maybe hit up the jungle for part lap. One of my particular favorites is Dust in the Wind, just to see how teams get on with potentially all having to change bikes and things like that.
What immediately sprung to mind was Road to Ruins as well.
Yeah.
That used to be my favorite course until the rolling resistant changes came in, and I don't think I've done it since.
Yeah, but that's the other thing, is it's all for the purists. It's all very well and good having asphalt tarmac based TTTs, keeping the climbs and things down a little bit, so more so the appeals there for everybody. But it is nice to throw some curveballs in from time to time, and try and knock those that hog the top of the coffee classes, if you want to call it, each week. Try and see if somebody else can find some strength and mix it all up a little bit.
I'm absolutely all for the curveballs. Throw more, please.
But I do have to say, Martin, when you out and back again, I got dropped from one of our all but no drop teams on out and back again, and that was really a kick in the pants to increase my training, and I was it was really good.
Yeah, out and back is, well, obviously we have a lot more courses to choose from, but out and back was my all-time hated TTT route, because no matter what team I joined, I'm 6'8", I'm just over 100 kilos, whatever, a couple 100 pounds. That doesn't wash too well in any kind of team trying to get up a hill.
So I get this was amplified, I think. This kind of, so I picked an easy example. This was amplified with ZRL, wasn't it? That I think we saw a lot of people. I think maybe people took it a lot more seriously. I don't know whether the kind of partnership with Zwift, and this would be an interesting question for you, is kind of whether you were viewed differently through that partnership with Zwift for that league. But it almost felt like, well, it's just WTRL who do the TTT, and like, well, it's just a fun event. And then suddenly it became this like Tuesday night thing, and people were like, well, this is very serious. I think that actually changed how people were riding it. But then people seem less sympathetic to, hey, this is actually the alpha test we're in of a racing league on Zwift. Things are going to change. They're going to do things and go, like, as James has done as a race organizer with the herd, gone, I've done this and I've got it wrong, and I'm going to change it for the next series. And James, you've made mid-season rule changes as well and caught the same level of flag. But kind of, how did you feel about it? It did seem like there was a lot of vitriol, and kind of what would you say to people who are kind of really enjoyed the ZRL, but kind of maybe had some concerns about how you're changing things?
Yeah, we try and keep the changes to a minimum. But you know, sometimes, for instance, one of the changes we had to make with season 3, we had a handful of divisions after the uproar of people wanting to make sure that there were not 2 teams from the same club in the same division because they might work together. You know, my personal experience is that you don't. If you've got 2 herd teams, you're just as rivalry between the 2 of you. You don't generally help each other and work out. So we were pushed in some ways, mainly through comments, but pushed in some ways to try and split those teams up so they weren't too many from the same club in the same division. And that created uproar because you've got teams, oh, well, we've just been demoted 2 divisions and things. Well, you're going to need to shunt your teams around then to put yourselves back where you're supposed to be. But yeah, we get a lot of flack for making changes. Some of them are necessary. You know, don't think it provides much value to racing if there are 3 teams in a division, and that's essentially 18 riders week in, week out, where you've got other divisions with 100, and if we can move them into another division where they can be part of that bigger number as well. But yeah, we say the changes we try and keep to a minimum, but some of them do become necessary. And yeah, we do take a lot of flack, more on Facebook, but unfortunately that is Facebook's world. That's social media. It's a place where you can say what you like with no consequences, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, and we spoke a bit about that last week, and the world of certain people in the herd being chased about the veracity of their results. Let's move on to a more positive angle there. So I'm a huge fan of ZRL, huge fan of the TTT. One of the things I love about the TTT, and I think we'd all agree here, is actually you tend to ride with a very even split of riders. So that very rarely am I completely outgunning someone in my group. Very rarely are they completely outgunning me. You can choose to be no drop, which makes it a bit easier. And I think that was the almost like bit of magic that was missing for me in ZRL, is you'd still end up with, in a kind of B category race, you still end up with some very strong Bs in that race. And me, as at the time, as a very weak B, is just watching people sail off into the distance and kind of racing for 60th. And I think what you did in extending the points lower down was fantastic. And I think that encouraged racing much lower down, which was a really good move. But is there anything you've kind of got in the works, or anything you're planning, or anything you know of that Zwift are planning even, that kind of maybe brings that racing closer together again? So is it just that you hope that the leagues might churn, or is there something else we could look forward to?
Well, yeah, it's no secret. We're working with Zwift on a AutoCat system, as it's nicknamed at the moment. It doesn't really have a proper name. It's just called AutoCat, with a bunch of C1 to C6 that they, again, still unnamed. And what we're looking at are fairer ways to break up groups of riders. So, you know, at the moment we have generally A, B, C, D. I think most people understand how the watts per kilogram FTP model works. And a lot of people would disagree that it should apply to Zwift Racing just because of the way Zwift Racing is. And yeah, we've all seen plenty of, if you want to call them B riders, riding at 3.8, 3.9 in A races and winning. So it says, what it says to me is, watts per kilo is a little bit like measuring the torque of a car. It's how much power you can put down to the road based on your weight and things like that. And there has to be a better way to measure it, and essentially predict what somebody should be able to do and see how that compares to various other metrics. And then we can come up with a tighter gap, if you want to call it that, between the categories. So if you obviously call it C1 to 6, we can have different metrics that divide those divisions up, and those divisions can be subdivided as well. There's obviously the ZRL, particularly in Europe. I think there's something like 6 in each of the areas. There's 6 C divisions, 8 or 9 B divisions, 3 or 4 A divisions. And what would be cool is, you know, when I first started on Zwift years ago, being a big heavy guy, yeah, I might have 1600 watts at my disposal for sprinting, but you know, in an endurance race, you probably walk past me. I started off in the D category, wasn't there too long, got into the C category, but it took forever to go anywhere. Now, if you compare that to other games, you go up through the level systems and it's quite a lot quicker. And yeah, some people quite like the fact that, yeah, I'm a C rider forever. And others want to see themselves progress. And I think if there is a means and a way to subdivide people up into power-based or speed-based or endurance-based or even course type-based categories, then there is the ability then to subdivide those. So you make, for instance, just take the current model, you could have B1, B2, B3, B4, and you could work your way up through the B divisions, so to speak, as an individual rider. And different races would then be able to say, well, we're not just B, we're only doing B1, so go away, everyone else in B2, B3, or wherever else. So there's lots of ideas, lots of things being played with, and we have a 50 odd variables we can play with to figure, as we're figuring things out. The most challenging is the climbing, and last week with the classics was very interesting, because you put any group of riders together, they get smashed apart on the hill, and it becomes very, very difficult to keep tabs. As I allude to, if I walked into a cycling club, it'd be very easy for me to say, right, you need to be that, you need to be that, you need to be that. Zwift is like walking into a bar with a blindfold on, and you've got professional athletes right the way down to somebody who's just, you know, a couple of times a week having a bit of fun, and the whole spectrum of people in between. And there's a vast ability. So if you then divide them into 4 and shove them all in together, you're going to have some people sitting at the lower end of that power scale who are never going to get anywhere near the top end, because that's not what they're on Zwift for. And then you'll get others who will work for it, train, and practice those things. So, yeah.
Sorry, Carrie.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was going to say, it's fascinating to hear you talk about kind of it as a game, and I think that's where we've had discussions before, and it's something I think even Zwift needs to do more, is to be like, actually, we are a game. We're at the game end of the spectrum. Yes, we are. And as what I do in my professional life, I think the gamification of exercise is a fascinating thing, and it's really worthwhile. And it's interesting to hear about this idea of leveling as well. One example that strikes me, I don't know how well you know wheelchair basketball. So wheelchair basketball is a really good example of a category-based system. So basically based on what level of spinal damage you've got, you get a point system, and your team is allowed to be a certain total of points. So an able-bodied person could play in a wheelchair basketball team, but they're worth 5 points. Because they've got sort of full range of movement up torso. But then the really valuable people become the people who are really low points but incredibly skillful. So you could have somebody who is a big heavy D rider, but like I say, is great in a sprint, so can probably win the sprints if you can get them near the end. And actually because you could imagine a system where they become really valuable because they're really cheap to have in your team, but they're going to score you points if you can help them get to the end of the race. So it'd be quite an exciting, you can see some quite exciting systems and how you can kind of value different riders differently.
Well, interesting you mentioned that. When we were playing around with the team time trial, way back in week 10, something like that, James, you might recall seeing images, and obviously when the website went live, there was literally a line that said score underneath it. I think it said score, it might have just said points. Essentially, depending on the category of your rider, that rider cost that many points. And if your points added up between these boundaries, that was your team. So what we were looking at doing is if you were a team of seasoned Ds, couldn't get quite enough, and an A rider walked along and said, yeah, I'll join you, they would hit their score but not push them up a category. But we then realized that from that, for that poor A rider, they're either going to be doing all the pulling on the front and probably not get much of a workout. So we moved across to where we are with the coffee classes now. But yeah, we had something very similar in very early days of the TTT.
I think it's actually a really interesting team concept, though, because I mean, obviously you could have, say, 1A and 3Ds, probably a bit of a boring ride for the A rider, but or you could go double B, double C, and working out what the quickest way around the course based on which categories you're using adds an awfully interesting tactical layer to it as well.
Mm.
I absolutely get why you've gone down the route that you have gone down, but I think having a points-based category system would be very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I forget how many models I've been through, looked at, tested in the background, trying to work out whether it would work. What we do know is the key to this is simplicity. And if we just take the existing kind of recognized Zwift Power category system, the number of people who send, and James, you probably get the same, but we get emails and messages from people, this rider's done 2.6 watts per kilo, they should not be in the D categories. You do realize you need to turn that to an FTP. It's not just an average, and it needs to be the 20-minute number. So that even getting into Zwift racing and understanding how this works is quite complicated. And the key thing is, if you, again, going back to the gaming industry, say, for instance, I want to pick up a controller and play, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto or Gran Turismo. I pick up the controller, off I go. And I don't have to worry about whether my trainer's accurate, whether my heart rate monitor's working, whether I'm in the right pen for where I'm supposed to be, because the game just does it for me. And the game keeps tabs of where I am, and it keeps it simplistic. Gran Turismo, I know I've got my B license, so I know I can work to this level, and that's the maximum power car I can get at this particular time. Things like that.
That's because Gran Turismo doesn't let you go into your A license races without having an A license, unlike a different piece of cycling software that does.
Yeah, no, there are things going on in the background. As I said to many people, I read a lot on the forums. I get a lot of flack on the forums as well, and those people get some pretty blunt replies. But I see the flack that Zwift get, but what people got to understand is Zwift have a customer base. You can call it 3.5 million, something like that. You can tell from Zwift Power, and we can tell from everything that we do, that roughly 8% of the Zwift community is racing. So that drops the numbers right down. You're talking sort of 250, 300,000 that actively get involved in some racing throughout the year. Then for 6 months of the year, 60% of them are gone, vanished. So effectively, 60% of Zwift customers are not on the platform during particularly the Northern Hemisphere summer. So when you've got to sit down and say, right, okay, we've got 85% of our customers doing group rides, we've got however many percent of our customers doing this, where are we going to channel our efforts? Well, racing is now a very, very small part of that pie.
Yeah, so I think, and I've said it on this podcast before, what I always say to that is, before I started racing, and actually before I started racing in the herd, because I did try racing on a couple other things, but it just, I couldn't figure it out, didn't know what was going on. I joined Zwift for January, February, March. and that was it. And I stopped every year, and I did that for 2 years or 3 years, or I think I did it for 2 years, and I intended to do it for the third until I hopped into the Herd Racing League. So that's multiplied the revenue Zwift gets from me personally by 4, and then multiplied it by 8 because my wife is now doing it and probably wouldn't have if I hadn't gotten in whole hog. So it's and that's entirely to racing because nothing else is nearly as engaging.
No, and I would agree with that. I mean, I'm a competitive guy. I come from various different levels, but quite high levels of particularly rugby in the past. And I came along to Zwift and tried the riding around the world randomly, have a go at some sprint points here, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I needed a competition, hence got into racing. At the end of the day, that's part of my DNA, so to speak, is competition.
And you wouldn't spend the time you do organising the competitive events you do if you weren't that way, I guess, as well, Martin. So,
yeah, very true, very true. And having a competitive mind and trying to put competitive events together, not only for people like me, but also trying to cater for those who are not competitive, if you want to call it, more the social end of because we have plenty of teams that come through the TTT. They're no drop like some of the herd teams. But and there were times when this was very manual. I didn't appreciate 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm still sitting there waiting for whatever team it was. It's usually a group of girls who are having a social TTT ride. It's like, ladies, please hurry up. I'd like to go back to bed.
I know, but genuinely, and I would, on behalf of those ladies, but on behalf of some of our teams of the herd as well, I would thank you for that effort, because I know there are people who genuinely will do a time trial in a long time and they will have the same 8, 9, 10 people every week, and that might be one of their 2 interactions with Zwift that they do. So in my box of really good things that exist in the world, like, I definitely put that in there. Like, it's a great thing they do that, and so on their behalf, thank you for doing that. I've kind of quizzed you slightly unfairly. Let's talk about some cool stuff though. James, you kind of soft launched this on the Facebook page, but we've got a bit of a partnership with Martin and some help from WTRL, haven't we?
We do. Martin and I have spoken numerous times in the past over probably the last couple of years. But he's obviously put together this fantastic suite of race results, and with our time trials on Monday, one of the failings of Zwift Power is that, yes, I have a single race series with 5 different events with no draft. I've always wanted to be able to sort them by the fastest times. And I just asked Martin if he could do that for me, and just went, yeah, it's really easy. So Martin went off and put us together a really smart league page for our Stampede race on Mondays. And I do have the web address. It is WTRL.racing/herd-stampede, and that is not one of the worst things I've had to say today.
We'll put that in the show notes for those of you that
thank you.
English days of the week listed in sensible order, James.
So basically, all of our Stampede races are on the WTRL website. They are sorted by time across all 5 events each week, and those times determine the scores in the league series as well. So Martin, I've said it to you a number of times already, but really, really, really grateful. Thank you ever so much.
No, you're welcome. It was there's some new things to learn in putting that together as well. But there's a lot of people don't realize this. My background is working in medicine and training doctors and nurses and people like that. All this stuff I do with computers is self-taught, and predominantly since joining WTRL.
Done a great job. Thank you.
Fantastic. I've not got any further questions for you. You're more than welcome to join us for the rest of the show and listen to three slightly drunk people waffle about Zwift. But if you want to go now, we'll also say thanks and massive appreciation for your time and joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you. I'll chill out here in the background and listen in.
Oh, excellent.
I've actually got one more cheeky question, if that's okay. So we've got TTT, ZRL, Classics, Duathlon, Running League. What's next?
Oh, there's a couple of things floating around in the background at the moment. There are some...
rowing floats.
there are some interesting concepts on the table for ZRL as well. But unfortunately, I can't say too much about those just at this point in time. But put it this, the autumn or the fall or the winter season, whatever you want to call it, is looking to be pretty promising from certainly from the Zwift WTRL partnership.
Are they going to copy all my routes again?
No.
That's too bad, because James picks great routes. Martin, just to kind of sign off on this segment with you, definitely, I've been kind of a big proponent of ZRL within the herd, and thank you for the work on it. It's been really fun. We've dug a lot of racers, a lot of people who were not racers and are now racing and are really into racing. And most especially, actually, between I think it was the Empowerment series, was it? Right before the first ZRL? Yeah. Between that and then leading into ZRL, the herd only had a handful of active women racing right before that. And when it first came out that there weren't any mixed in the first season, we didn't think that Becca was going to have anybody to race with. And then all of a sudden, the herd is one of the biggest women's racing teams, and it really surprised me, and it's gone really well. So anyway, but in all the fun we've had, because we've had a lot of fun with ZRL. Thanks a lot.
No, you're welcome. That's good. Good to hear the women's development as well, particularly. Obviously, the TTT has its own women's element to it as well, and that has been a big springboard into introducing a lot of people into the social side, I guess, of racing, but also at the opposite end of the spectrum, the competitive end. And then ZRL has introduced a lot of those people into, if you want to call it, full-blown racing. But it's still very interesting. Only about a third of what we would consider our TTers are involved in ZRL. Mm-hmm. So we've got two very different audiences.
I think you can draw a very direct line from that through to our newest series, the Herd Series, which we were getting hundreds of sign-ups like days in advance for that series. So it's just been incredibly popular, hasn't it, James?
Until the Zwift Classic started.
Apologies for that.
I can't compete with you guys. As soon as you guys stick on an event, all of my riders just run away.
we just do as we're told. Zwift say you need to run this for us on this date. We put it together and away we go.
So James, Craig has been very complimentary, but what ridiculously stupid route have you picked for us this week on the Herd Summer Racing League?
So this weekend in the Herd Summer Racing League, we head to Crit City for 16 laps of the downtown Dolphin route with 16 time segments up the cobbled Prime Hill. This is not a race for the faint-hearted. Will you aim to stay with the front group and kick for the sprints, or will you look to take it easy between sprints and save yourself for big efforts? Craig could be talking about this for a very, very long time.
I love downtown Dolphin. I hate the reverse route. I can never remember what it's called. I hate the reverse version of this with a passion.
Bell lap.
Love.
You and I did Bell lap together in the Bees, and after getting dropped by Orjan, Bowser and co. I think Bowser was trying out a B race because he was really, really close to getting promoted. And then you and I, after about a couple of laps, dropped off and then just joined the C's. And doing it on the reverse route, the rollers are a lot more uphill than downtown Dolphin.
It's just a killer. It's interesting. I don't think there are tactics on this. I think you've got to stay in a bunch because this one we score on the primes. You've got to be fast up the primes. You're not doing a very quick time up that prime on your own. I think you've got to just try really hard to be in a group of people. I don't
agree entirely, but that group does not have to be your category.
That is true. So this is the, we could see all the categories. There's a 5-minute start delay. So there's just going to be experience of this one. There's just going to be riders everywhere. It's going to be utter chaos. You're going to have no idea who you're racing. I remember doing a similar one where Lee Hodgson and I were racing each other. And I think I saw him about twice in between various different groups. And we weren't really sure who was what and what was up. So yeah, it's utter chaos. And I think this is bloody brilliant. And actually, I think this is a good thing about longer rides. I would encourage you, James, to do more longer rides on really short courses because it's basically impossible to be riding on your own, which is one of the bad features about really long routes, isn't it? If you get dropped, you just kind of sit on your own for another hour and a half on the bike, which is just a bit dull. Craig, you've got the raised eyebrows of fresh tactics. What are you suggesting on this one?
Actually, I don't have fresh tactics. This one sucks. For all that I like sprinting, I am not good at this. I don't know why. I think it might be that I go too hard in the first few laps, but no, I always get pounded and dropped on this course. But there are a lot of options. And so going back to the first time we did this in HSRL, and I don't even remember what series it was, James. But I remember, I think it was 2 because I think Ben was involved. And
I think
was
2
in the same category. So I remember Ben hooking on with the bees during the live broadcast, and nobody quite being sure what he was doing because he just hung on, and he's a big guy with big watts and was able to do it, and just the draft of the faster riders was enough that he did really well. So it's there are different ways to attack this, because we also saw, I think in the same series, somebody else, I think, basically go at 1.5 in C in between this primes and hammer that climb every time, and they did very well as well. So there's a lot of ways to approach this because there are so many. Less so because James, you've scaled the points per place on the finish based on the number of points now, but because I don't think you had on Series 2.
I think it was half and half. I think on Series 2, so Series 1 was 1/3 finish, 2/3 primes. On Series 2, there'd been a bit of whining from people who wanted to go for GC, so I went half and half. And then I think from then onwards, I dropped back to 1/3 finish points. I think we have to turn to our resident sprinter, Becca Kingdom. How are you approaching this race?
Stay with the group, sprint like hell, wait for the group. I love this course. I love the sprints. I love any of them where you have to repeatedly hammer your legs continually, because my legs recover a lot faster than a lot of people. So it works for me. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. And yeah, I think quite a lot of the other herd people are, because usually from the marmots, I have to drag them kicking and screaming into HSRL at the weekends, but everyone was quite happy to volunteer this week. So.
Yeah.
I think this is a really, really fun race.
So there's kind of 2 waypoints we have to look out for on this course, aren't there? The first one is, where does the cobble climb start? And you kind of, it is basically where the cobbles are. You turn right, that's your kind of marker for where the section begins, and you just hammer it up to the top. Turn right again, you see the banner, and then there's a bit of a downhill.
You need to be going before the right-hand turn.
And on the other section, you've got the hairpin bend, and that's where your sprint is, isn't it? So as you come out at the end of the lap. Craig, you're shaking your head. Is the sprint not the start-finish line on Downtown Dolphin?
No. The sprint is the right-hand turn up the cobbled hill. And then the only time that you need to worry about that hairpin at the end is lap 16.
Oh, we're not. So that's not a time segment. How does
No.
I'm far too lodged in bullseye mode where I'm just used to sprinting out that one. So that makes the course so much easier then. So it is.
Yep. So there is only one sprint every 2 kilometers, not 2 sprints every 2 kilometers, because otherwise that would be. Oh, that's a brilliant idea, Steve. Thank you.
So, into other things, James, what power-ups have we got? Is it the standard power-ups this week? If you were sneaky, you'd have put the steamroller in, because I think that would have been an interesting one to explore on this segment. But is it the standard 3 that you normally put in?
It is always the standard 3. Yes, I could have approached Zwift about changing them, but there's always an element of error when you're looking at 7 races and asking them to make the same change on each one. Whereas all I have to do is just make sure the route's right. So I generally don't ask Zwift to make changes unless I absolutely have to.
So we're basically order of power-ups. What do we think? Feather, aero, and then truck as the probably 3 in order, the ones you want to use. Aero is probably the best one to have. If I remember rightly with this one, the segment, certainly in C's, is slightly longer than the power-up time. So truck can be advantageous because you can press it before you're having to worry about just sprinting really hard.
It's a 200-minute sprint. You should be able to do it in under 15 seconds. I think my biggest question is, do you take the Venge or do you take the Tron? Is the gradient going to outweigh the advantage you would get from the Venge to side more with the Tron?
I'm going to say yes. In my opinion.
I'm going for Venge.
Yeah, so I had a chat with Lisa Jones about this earlier, actually, and I have no scientific knowledge over this whatsoever, but I think the 2 bikes are going to be exactly the same pace because of the hill, because the Tron is slightly better on rolling terrain, and I think at the end of the day, I really don't know, and I would have taken the Venge over the Tron, but who knows? Eric Slange, I suspect. He'll know.
Or he'll claim he knows anyway. So
I'm gonna diss James massively here. James, you're a B and you're a bit snobby about slow riders now. So the fastest C's in the race earlier were doing this segment in just over 15 seconds. So it is your power up is going to finish before the finish line if you're hitting it before you start the segment for the most C's and D's. And probably some Bs as well, because I was probably still not doing it in under 15 seconds when I was in the Bs. So there is some advantage with the van in that you can just hit it before the segment starts and then not worry about things. You just be conscious where your power up finishes on this one. So we're going with the Tron, right? Pink Tron. I was just ignoring you. There was some chat about other bikes. We all know that the best bike is the Pink Tron. It is the fastest of all Trons, and Martin will explain that to you with science later on after the call if you want. So what else is coming up this week in the World of the Herd Racing League, James? But most importantly, as ever, in which order are you going to list the days of the week?
Mate, to be fair, like it's been a good 5 weeks since I did it in non-date order.
And I've been disappointed every time.
I'm sure you have. So we have 16 laps of Downtown Dolphin for HSRL over this weekend. And then we have Herd of Mountain Goats, which is Sunday and Monday, which is a single lap of Innsbruck UCI. And then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we have race number 5 in the Stampede, which is 3 laps of flatland loop in the Mercury Islands. Followed by our ladies category racing series on Tuesday, which is a single lap of Richmond roller coaster. Moving on to Wednesday and Thursday, where we have our multi-lap points race, the Bullseye, which will be 5 laps of the Fan Flats in Richmond, the end. In date order.
Excellent news. Any of those you're particularly looking forward to this week?
I'm really enjoying the Stampede. I love and hate individual time trials. I'm quite good at holding a steady pace over a period of time, but being lighter, Brent Robinson kicks my ass every single week. And it's great because there's so much camaraderie. Like Monday evening ITTs, it's the same people every single week. We all get together, we all have a good time, we all moan about how we've nearly vomited or actually vomited, and it's really, really good and loads of fun.
Cool. And so we'll go on to what I'm inventing as this new segment of things I've seen people moan about on Facebook, which I feel we need to correct them on. So I did mention two things in the group earlier and I've forgotten one of them. So I'm going to start with the one I can remember, which is always the best place to start. This was racing out of category. And we've talked a bit with Martin about autocats, but we get a lot of people going, I've just been promoted from a C to a D. I see there's a longer ride. Should I go back to the Ds? Because I just won't be able to do C power for that long. And the short answer is that basically the categories are based on your ability to do a certain power over a certain time. It's not a certain power over infinite time. So everybody is racing to the same kind of categorization. So if you've made it up to a C, there will be other Cs who will be able to do the similar sort of 20-minute power as you will, but they will tail off after that the same way that you will as well. So I would encourage you, if you're categorized in a certain way, race in that category because everyone else will. I think the other reason for not doing that is if you're over-catting, for want of a better word, it means you can damage the race for other people. So you can probably do D pace longer than most of the Ds now can if you've been freshly promoted to a C. Anyone have any other tips for people on that basis? And anyone want to disagree? Anyone remember what the other thing was I suggested in Facebook earlier?
I don't remember what you suggested on Facebook, but it's worth bringing up the difficulties that a lot of people had in Zone 12 on Thursday's TTT, where one of the content delivery systems had a massive outage and an awful lot of people were blaming either WTRL or Zwift for not being able to get into the pen. There was a very, very big internet thing that broke, basically.
Yeah, so as far as the racing out of category, so I think back to me as a D, which was a little over a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. And I was totally unable to keep up in the Ds. And then all of a sudden there were two races that I was second and first on Zwift Power, and all of a sudden I'm a C. And those were sub 30-minute races. And so right around that time is when I found the herd as well. And I started in on HSRL, which is actually terrific because the fastest time segments gave me something to do, even though I was immediately kicked out of the pack as soon as we hit an incline. And yeah, I mean, I was last several times in that around that time. I was last in a lot of C races. And when you just come up from D, you're gonna be last or near last in a lot of C races. That's just the way it is, and I fully expect to have that in real life because I just switched categories as well, and that's the way it is. You've been at top of category. It's going to be a big change. Now I have to, come into the confessional. When I was at the top of C, I definitely avoided shorter races for a while in order to finish a race series. I wasn't deliberately doing less power, but I definitely avoided races which would cause me to go all out for 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's frankly a travesty that I got into Bs before you did, Craig, but let's say that one. So I've looked up the thing. I've gone through our thread from earlier. I don't think we're going to say much about it, but it is the draft mechanic in Zwift. But first, I had a question. The big internet thing, did they try turning it on and off again, James? Is that how it was fixed?
I suspect that's probably how they fixed it.
Excellent. Seen some people have been complaining like Zwift have changed the draft mechanic. It's not. We can't understand A, what's broken about it that people are complaining about, and we can't understand B, if anything's changed. So I've seen people complaining about the draft mechanic. Yes, it has been tweaked. They have done an update. I don't think it's massively got worse from what I've seen of watching videos, but I haven't raced since the update.
I don't think the updates made an enormous amount of difference. I think when Zwift originally made the tweak to draft mechanics, it made it a lot harder for TTT teams to paceline, essentially. And there's a lot of weaving left and right. I haven't had that much experience since the latest update, but I did notice an element of weaving, but probably not to the same extent as there was beforehand. As to whether or not it's better or worse, not sure yet.
Yeah, so I definitely say, and I only did one TTT yesterday as opposed to Becca, who did two, but I would say it was a little different, but not, I was still able to go to where I wanted to within our 6-rider pack, because obviously the Quokkas had to chuck one kid.
Yeah, I find it a little better, to be honest. I didn't seem to spend so much time in the middle of the road compared to normal, and we did get a pace line for quite a lot of our first TTT. So yeah, in my opinion, it's only been tweaked slightly, but it is being tweaked in the right direction.
And this is where I get Martin's points earlier about kind of understanding as if Zwift as a game is really important. And I know I've said this before. In real life, you are getting so much more feedback about how the draft is performing than you are in the game. You've basically got the very crude watts per kilogram that you can see other riders doing. You can't feel the wind. You don't know where your position is. It's not like Zwift's giving you a lane and you can see that you're in lane 4 and the rider in front of you is in lane 4. So you should be 100% drafting them if you're within a certain distance. So I think we should expect that there is going to be, with any tweak to the game, there is going to be some relearning of how we play the game. So I would say to people that it is likely to change, and you might need to change your behaviours, and don't be surprised by that, really. But Martin, I don't know if you know any more. You obviously have a lot of people with the TTT. Anything you've heard about the draft mechanic? Do you think it's massively changed, or is it just people growing?
The latest draft mechanic is meant to prevent essentially your rider swerving across the road and all of a sudden outside of the draft. For anybody who's done, I think, is it Fuego Flats? As you approach the start of the final sprint, that quite long sprint section, your rider always swerves off to the other side of the road. There's things like that they've corrected. It's not a huge difference to the pack dynamics as it stands at the moment.
Fantastic. So let's finish as we always do. Let's tweak this slightly in honour of Martin, because I don't want to put him in awkward. Normally we'd finish with things that have annoyed us about the world of Zwift this week. So maybe it would be fun to make Martin answer that one, but at the top. Let's just have anything that we're particularly happy about on Zwift this week, or that has particularly annoyed us.
So I guess in the silence there, I'll go first. I absolutely loved the McCurry Islands team time trial. That course was way more challenging than I expected, and we had a really good time. So that was
so we were quite looking forward to being able to use some of the stuff on the new McCurry Islands. But yeah, we play it safe, because at the end of the day, if we have 2,500 people, as it is at the moment, summer, 2,500 people come through the team time trial and something doesn't work, I don't want to be dealing with all those emails.
I think that's fair.
Good. Now, I'll add something as well, because I know there's some head teams on the list. We have finally got news of what the ZRL prizes were for the division winners. It's a very shiny white helmet from Charlie with ZRL logos and decals on. So congratulations again from WTRL and from Zwift to all those who won the divisions. And I believe 1st of August, you should find those in your garage or garage, depending on where you come from.
That's excellent. And so these people all stand out, not only because they're wearing a fantastic herd kit designed by Corey Chestnut, but also because they get a shiny new helmet, which would be great news. And if only we could have multicolored helmets so we could tell each other apart in things we wanted to wish for. I'll go next while James and Becca think a bit more. I'm going to complain about the UK weather. It's continued to be hotter than the sun. I fitted a chain to my bike today and sweated more than I have, and more than any man should, I'll be honest. So I've been unable to Zwift due to extreme heat. No fans are enough. It's just stupidly hot.
I've actually really enjoyed the UK weather, apart from when trying to go to sleep. On Tuesday, I took myself out for a 70-kilometer gravel ride, which appears to have like broken one of my wrists. Which was, I looked outside, it was glorious. I got on my bike, it started to drizzle. It then stopped drizzling, and I had an hour in the sun. At which point, it started to hail. And then stopped, and then I had another half an hour in the sun. At which point there was an hour-long thunderstorm. So by the time I got back home, I was absolutely piss wet through. I'd been attacked by hailstones, and it was great. It was such a good experience. I would have been much happier if it had been like glorious sunshine, like I'm certain it would have been in the southeast for the whole 2.5, 3 hours.
As I lived in Spain for several years, and I love this weather. This makes me happy. It feels like it should. But I went to the BMX track on Tuesday morning, and full Phelps helmet and long sleeves and long trousers, and it was the most disgusting thing I have ever done. So no BMX in this weather. And also after doing two, I loved the TTT, but Luke signed us up for 2 of them, and doing 2 of them in this heat was just too many, to be honest. We'll not be doing that again either.
How warm was it in near Exeter?
My Zwift room says 32 degrees when I started.
Yeah, consistently that there here. I'm another time I'll ask you to list the top 3 disgusting things you've done, Becca, but I think that's another show entirely.
I recall doing 2 laps of TikTok in 35 degrees when we had stupid heat wave about a year or 2 ago. It's been really hot this week, but I suspect we'll probably get a hotter week in August where it's just going to be completely intolerable to ride really fast indoors.
And I think the definitive hot weather story came, I can't remember if it was Tracy Taylor or Jane Brailsford who went to get some Haribo from their Zwift shed, and it had fused into a solid block. So I think it was some Tang Fastics or something. A bag of Haribo had melted and fused into a solid block of gelatin, which just isn't a temperature you should be riding a bike in.
But that sounds like fantastic use of Haribo to turn all these like silly little sweets into one really big, tasty, sugary mess.
and what a fantastic note to end on. So I'm going to say on behalf of everyone, thanks again for Martin for joining us tonight and for helping with the Stampede and for just a really cool chat about all things WTRL. And thanks to everyone else, and see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, guys.